Okay, morning everybody. Thanks for coming along this morning. So I'm going to talk about publishing to maximize the impact of your research. And if you have any questions as we go along, pop them in chat. I'll see them at the end, and I'll take questions at the end as well. Just easier that way. Hopefully that suits everybody. Okay, so publishing to maximize the impact of your research. So I suppose the first question I suppose to ask yourself is, why publish? And there could be a number of reasons for this, but so generally speaking, you want to exchange your ideas. You've done your research, you want to share it, you want to get it out there. You're going to build your reputation and career, so you want to, have a body of work that you can show, and then you want to disseminate your work on a global scale. So, you want to publish the work, and you want other people to be able to read it and make use of it in their research. Hopefully, you've got something new to say, solution to a current problem, or a hot topic in your field. But either way, it's a necessary step in the research process. So you could do research, but you don't want to be just sitting there. You want it to get out there and to impact society, culture, and research in general. What are you publishing? And this will determine, of course, where you're going to publish. Is it methodologies? Is it results? Maybe you're doing a review, summarizing a particular area. You could be doing a systematic review. Does it advance knowledge and understanding of a particular area? Don't publish things if there's no academic interest, out-of-date work, duplication of existing published research, incorrect or unacceptable conclusions. Just be careful about what you put out there, Okay. Um, then other options might be full articles, the traditional academic article. Maybe letters, that can be useful sometimes. That's kind of a speedier way of communicating new ideas. You might want to do a review, very popular. You'll get good readership, you'll get citations out of it, and that could be just general reviews or systematic reviews. You're looking at secondary sources, so it's a good way of getting published and getting some interest in your opinions. Conference papers, another option. So if your research is, say, ongoing, go to a conference, speak about it, interact with people there. Again, another way of getting your work out there. The conference proceedings will probably be published, and also great for networking and just promoting what you're doing. Journals driving content can be an issue. So this is obviously where the journal is approaching you for content because they're interested in a particular area or they want to produce a special edition. And sometimes it can be difficult in that sense to actually, publish what you want to publish rather than what the publisher wants to get from you. Then where do you want to publish? So is it the traditional print or e-journals, or are you going to go for open access? So traditional journal, you submit your paper and it's there behind a paywall and people pay to access it. Gold open access then, so there's options there for, paying article processing charge. So the gold is where you pay an article processing charge and your paper becomes open access. But then there's also green open access options. So that would be maybe where you self-archive in an institutional repository like Mural, for example, in Maynooth. You could deposit your paper in there to make it available. And typically when you see the journals, they will be gold journals. Some of them are what they call hybrid journals. So a certain proportion of the articles are behind the paywall, other ones are open access, and that's just based on the authors actually paying the article processing charge. Or, as you may know now, there's a number of open access agreements in Maynooth and other institutions. So the funders are but the publishers actually waive then the article processing charges. So your paper will be published open access. The background of this initially at least was the Plan S, and this is I suppose a push from funders because they were interested in, if they're funding the work, they want it to be available open access. So that's just some of the background on it. Then your thinking might be going around, do I publish in academic scholarly journals or professional journals? And I suppose you'd have to consider your motivation for the two of those. The traditional way is doing the academic journals, peer-reviewed journals, where your papers are getting read, they're getting cited, but then you also might have an audience in the professional journals. So you might want to actually speak to people who in the field as such. That could be, teaching, applied social studies, psychology, those kind of areas where there's people actually there on the ground doing the work, and that could be your audience. You could be trying to attract even, postgraduate research students to your area. So there's different motivations of where you might choose to publish. There could also be things like learned societies. It might be important for your research to get into those, just to kind of bump up your reputation in that particular academic field. Then you might be thinking, do I go for national level journals or do I go for international journals? So There's a lot of really good Irish journals that it might be important for you to be publishing in those. Um, but then on the other hand, a lot of the databases that track impact, they're looking at bigger international journals. So that's very good, important for, spreading the range of places that your research is read. So you might want to balance between the two of those. So again, that's something you might have to decide. But just to note on that, that Web of Science and Scopus, who will be the big kind of citation tracking databases, Scopus particularly, which would be the one that feeds into the university rankings, they're not necessarily tracking some of the Irish journals. So that's something you might want to check when you're getting that balance for your publications right. And similarly, speaking to a home audience might be important. So you might want to speak to people in Ireland along with the international community. You might also be thinking about multi-inter or transdisciplinary journals. That can bring you maybe to a broader audience, but then the trouble can be, finding a journal of sufficient quality that suits what you're publishing. So just things to consider there, and also the editors, the reviewers, do they understand your work? Um, the citation side of things, there's definitely obviously a higher readership, a broader readership, but do they actually translate into citations? Science, you can kind of say that, but then sciences tend to do better citation-wise anyway, so it's just something to consider. But there can be advantages of, particularly say for the humanities, if you're publishing maybe in a more science-type journal, that will increase your readership and citations. So there's a balance to be struck there. And then the journal, some of the factors in which journal you include. So the scope of the journal. Does it suit your subject area? Is it a topical fit for you? Obviously, is it a quality journal? What's the reputation of the journal, the ethics of the journal? How far does it reach the impact of it? Will it be read by your target audience? And just say in terms of targeting, the best approach probably is to target the journal first, then write the paper. Most people do it the other way. They write the article and then try and find a home for it. But it's more effective if you actually target the journal before you actually write the paper. It's going to increase your chance of acceptance. So just something to consider. Then the other thing, where are your peers publishing? So what are the journals in your field? Speak to librarians and colleagues. Have a look at the key authors in your field. So you could look at them up in Scopus or Web of Science. Just see where they're publishing, what are they researching. Have a look at the publishers' websites. See does their kind of ethos appeal to you, type of topics they cover, what's been in previous editions, all that kind of thing. And then bibliographic databases, as I mentioned, they're great for the titles and rankings. And also Sherpa Romeo database is good for looking at things like copyright policies and self-archiving. So if you do want to go down the green archiving route, if you want to self-archive your paper, if you go in there and you'll see the terms and conditions of copyright with the various publishers. So it'll tell you what you're allowed to do. Is there embargo for a number of years, all that kind of thing on your paper when you publish it. Okay, other considerations for the right journal, things like the peer review process, what suits you. It's generally single blind, double blind, or open reviews. So obviously single blind, they know who you are, you don't know who they are. Double blind, nobody knows who anybody is. And then open review, both parties know who they are. So again, you might want to put that into the mix if that might be important to you for some reason. How quickly do they turn the papers around? How quickly do you want to get your work out there? How quickly does the e-publication become available? Obviously, those that do still publish in print, the e-version is going to appear quicker. What are their acceptance and rejection rates? Some journals, they might have a low acceptance rate. They mightn't publish that often. So that could really slow down your publication. So you might want to consider that. But on the other hand, then you also want to get into the best journal you can. So lots of things to consider. Who's on the editorial board? Are they kind of open to your kind of research? Maybe they are, maybe they're not. Might want to consider that. What are the open access options? Do they allow for that? Some journals are completely open access. You just pay a charge at the beginning and all the papers are open access. Or did you want to go for that kind of, gold open access or article processing charges paid? And hopefully it'll be included in one of the open access agreements. So it'll be waived. So do you retain copyright? So if that's important for you, you might want to look at Creative Commons licenses and, where you can maybe designate it. It can be open, but not for commercial reasons. Similarly, rights retentions, what rights do you want to retain? Is it indexed in Web of Science and Scopus or other major databases? What are the rankings of the journal? And again, you can check that in Web of Science and Scopus. So which are the highest impact journals in your field? And do you want to focus on those more than other ones? And then levels of metrics as well. So you can track other authors and your own impact as part of the consideration. And that's just a bit more types of peer review. Okay, the slides will be available, so you can go dig into that a bit more if that's to do that. I just wanted to mention predatory publishing as well. So you will find you'll get a lot of approaches from seemingly very complementary, positive publishers who really want to publish your work, and for a small amount of money, they're happy to do that. But just be careful that they are actually reputable publishers. They're not predatory publishers. There are people out there who are just collecting content to make available for profit. So just watch out for that. And I have a guide on that in the library that you can have a look at. Okay, but some of the kind of main checks are things like, do you know the journal? Is it similar to a well-known journal? Is it indexed in Scopus and Web of Science? Is it in Ulrich's periodicals directory, which would be an international directory of journals? Has the publisher approached you directly? Do they seem very persistent? Have they suggested your article be published quickly? Is there a clear process to explain the cost before you submit your work? There should be. Okay, a reputable publisher will have that. Evidence of the peer review process. They might name certain people, they might have an editorial board, but do you know them? Do they know they're on that board? You can check into all that. Journal website, where is it located? A lot of them will tend to be just offices, door plates kind of thing. So you want to check into that. Quality of existing articles in the journals. So have a look at the journals and see what you think of previous papers. Do they look like they're of the same standard that you might be used to? And if they're quoting an impact factor, again, which they often do, you could check that in Web of Science or Scopus and just see if that's accurate. There's also a little tool here you can use called Think, Check, Submit, and that'll run you through kind of a similar process. Okay, and it'll bring you through all the things you might want to be thinking about before you submit your paper. And this is just a listing then of places to check for publication titles of Scopus, Web of Science. Google Scholar has lists as well. There's Harzing's Journal Quality List that you could have a look at. And then Publisher Parish, you can look in there. Publisher Parish is a free tool you can download that analyzes the data in Google and will tell you things about impact of individuals, papers and journals. Okay. And then there's also other listings that might be related to particular subject areas. I know law would have a lot of their own listings, business would have their own listings. And this would just be a list that they feel represents them more than Scopus or Web of Science would. And they'd rank journals in there, 4 or 5-star journals, just listing the better ones. And it's a list of some of them: Washington Lee for law, Financial Times top 50, Chartered Association of Business Schools, European Reference Index for Humanities. So there are other listings that you may be aware of within your own subject field that you might feel they would be a good place to go to get the highest impact journals. And then, as I mentioned, these are some of the databases that you could use. And just with a health warning on these, all metrics are based on a specific data set, but Scopus is the one used for university ranking. So you're not going to find everything in any of them, but you will know there will be certain, quality control tests in there. They're all good quality journals, but there may well be journals that aren't included in there that are very good journals, and you might have very valid reasons for wanting to publish in those. So just to bear that in mind when you are using them. Okay, some of the main metrics used. So Web of Science will do a journal impact factor, and that's a 5-year measure. It has been a 2-year measure as well, but they feel I think 5 years is better. And this is number of current year citations over the previous 5 years. Okay, so that gives you a sense of, the impact of certain journals. I suppose it's indicative, is probably the best way to describe it. It's not an absolute thing, but it gives you a sense of what are the high impact journals. Scopus, slightly different, 5-year measure. Then within Scopus, there is a site score, and that looks at a 3-year measure. Okay. And that's over the previous 3 years. Then they also have something they call the SJR, which is Scientific Journal Rankings. And that's number of citations plus the influence and rank of the journal. So that has kind of a notion of maybe the prestige of a journal is included in there. And then we have SNP, which is Source Normalized Impact per Paper. And that's probably the most popular one that's used. So that takes into account the subject areas. They give a weighting depending on the subject area. So you're kind of comparing like with like. So that is a good place to check it out. Okay. So next up, so what I might do at this stage is I'm just going to nip into some of these databases. I'm going to pop out of this for a second. Put that for a second. Hopefully this is all going to work for me. Yeah. Okay. So this is the Web of Science database, and you'll find all these in the A to Z of databases on the library homepage. Okay. So you can search by documents in there. Let's go into the menu. Okay. Hmm, where's this gone now? So just backtrack a bit this now. Oh, okay. Check it a second now. Okay. What's that now? Actually, that doesn't seem to be up. I'll just pop over to Scopus. Actually, might be a good option there. You can find it. Yeah, so I'll just go into the Scopus one. Might be the better one to actually go into. So Scopus has the journal rankings as well. And there's kind of a couple of ways of approaching it in Scopus. You can either go into sources, which is a complete listing of all the resources they have. So if I go into that, okay, that's going to look a bit like that. So there's your listing. You see that they're listed there by site score. But if I click across here as well, I can also see them by SNP, which is the source normalized. That's the one that takes into account the subject area, or the SJR, which includes the prestige of the journal. Okay, and I'm just going to go backtrack a slight bit there on that. So that's the source listing. And once I'm within that, I can filter them then by subject area. Okay, so just click into that. There's my different subject areas. And these kind of come with a health warning as well, because these are algorithms that they assign certain journals to certain subject areas. So again, you might find that certain journals aren't where you'd expect them to be. But again, it's just the algorithm kind of popping them in there. So I might decide I want something on, say, general earth and planetary sciences. I'm going to apply that. There's my results. And once then they pop up, I've got my titles and they're currently ordered by site score. But if I wanted the SNP one, I can just go over there and sort them by that. Okay, so it'll just rejig the list slightly. Okay, and then I get my top ones listed there. And within that, I can also then filter them down by, the top 10%, for example. If you wanted that, you don't necessarily want the whole list, and certain quartiles if that's of interest, and then just journals. You could apply that. Okay, and that'll just rejig my list a bit. And that'll kind of give you a sense then of what might be the top journals in that subject area. Now, I say they might necessarily match with what you're expecting, or there could be journals that you know are important that aren't kind of within that because it's just not fitting in within the classification they've assigned them to. So in that case, what you could do is there's also a compare tool that you can go into. So if I go into advanced document search, okay, it's a bit like that. And just down the bottom of that, oh, I don't know. Yeah, over there, sorry. They have this nicely hidden away, this thing called compare sources, which is another nice kind of additional tool. And what that'll do is it'll allow you to put in the journal title and then compare it. So I can search for that to see the journal cells. So there's ones with cell in the title. They're sorted by site score. I'm going to just go into SNP, sort them by the SNP ranking now. And so if I decided, right, which one do I want to put them in? I'm going to go for, say, American Journal of Cell Biology, and that'll kind of pop up in the adjacent screen. And once I'm in there, then it'll give me a breakdown of what's going on there. It's giving me the various scores. There's the SJR, the scientific one. That's the prestige, the source normalized, number of citations a year. Um, I wouldn't be worried about the dip off you see in these graphs. That's just the more recent ones. Obviously, don't have many citations. Documents per year. Okay, which is declining. You might want to investigate what's going on there now. It could be just there's less issues or you know some different approach to it. Percent not cited is very low, so that's more or less saying to you if you get into this journal, you're getting cited. And then it's telling you review articles. So very low until 2022. There seems to be a bit of a spike. They seem to be up to about 50% review articles. So when you're publishing there, you might think, okay, maybe I need to be putting a review article together. They seem to be open to that now. And then you could quite easily then, if you were thinking, okay, that's that journal. And then I'm going to have a look at, I should just put the first one there, say, just do a compare. And they'll do kind of a cross-reference then. So you can start to compare the different journals. and get a sense of which is doing better and maybe why they're doing better and the kind of thing they're publishing. So very easy to kind of go in and have a look at that. Okay, so that's kind of a quite nice tool. What I'm in Scopus, I might show you as well, they have an additional tool called SciVal, which sits in there. So what SciVal does, it sits on top of the Scopus data set. Okay, and if I go into that, you can kind of do more analysis once you're in there. So with the likes of SciVal, you could take a slightly different tangent on this. You could actually go in and look at, say, as I have up here, Oxford Brookes University. You could look at them, and then you could break them down by their different subject areas and see what that universe. So if somebody told you Oxford Brookes is the best for whatever research area, you can go in and have a look at that, and go down and analyze why is that? Who are their top authors? What are they researching? Where are they publishing? All that kind of thing. You could do kind of a little bit of research around that and get a sense of the work that's out there. So again, I was interested in what they're up to. So what subject area we could pick? Say something like, say we go for biochemistry, for example, and just keep that. So just get their output. So they're telling me they have 40 papers on that. I could get a list of the publications. I could get a list of the authors involved, their impact, and so on. And when you go into the publications, then you could actually have a look at the impact of those journals. Or you can also go over here, left-hand side, and you can start to pick out individuals. So you could pick out certain individuals, see what they've published, where they're publishing. So that kind of idea of, if you know there's somebody eminent in your field and you kind of want to emulate them a bit, you can go and see what they've published, track their publications. You can also compare groups of researchers, to build up departments to compare them with each other, compare maybe Maynooth to another institution, and kind of work out from that, what are we researching? What are we strongest in? Where should we be publishing? All those kind of ideas. And that's just over here into the compare button. You can kind of, benchmark one group against another. Okay. And you'll get all these kind of, the scholarly output, publication year. There's various, you can mess with the X and Y axis and get different. So lots of different metrics to be had. You can do an analysis to all sorts of different degrees. Again, depending on how you want to decide where you're publishing, what you're researching, all those ideas. 'Cause as you can imagine, it all determines the impact you're going to get. What's your research topic, where you're publishing. So who's your readership going to be? What citations are you going to get it? So there's kind of a lot of background work you can kind of do on that. Okay. And as I mentioned there, in Web of Science, not as advanced as this. They do have a tool called Insights, but we don't have access to it. But certainly their basic, Web of Science, if you go in there, go into products and just look at their journal impact factor. And you can go in there again and just filter the journals down by category and find the highest impact journals in your area. And you can also obviously search them individually. The rough difference, I suppose, between Web of Science and Scopus is Scopus is a bit more European. It's Elsevier. Web of Science is a group called Clarivat. Yeah, it used to be Thomson Reuters used to own it. It's a bit more US centric, if you like. So lots of overlap, but also unique content. So, good places to look for your papers. Okay, so I might go back just to this bit again. Hopefully I'll link up. So say that's Scopus, sources, rankings, and compare sources in there. And the compare sources is just hidden away in advanced document search if you're going in there. And that's SciVal, as I showed you. And in there, you're going to be looking at institutional level, individual level, group of research level, compare and contrast, that kind of idea, looking at the output, the research areas, where they're publishing, all that kind of thing. SciMago is just another additional tool, and you can just Google for this, but it'll use a Scopus data set, but just does a little bit more analysis, and I find it pulls up slightly different journals in the categories. They have different ways of doing your analysis, so that could be a good place to look as well for journals. And this is Web of Science. That was not cooperating for me on that occasion, but that's a good place to look as well. Google Scholar publication categories is another one you can look at, and you can just go in and log in under your own Google account. Is probably the best way to do your analysis in Google Scholar, and just go into Google Scholar citations, and you'll find a lot of these additional little tool. You can look at your own profile, so see how your publications are doing. You can look at other academics, but you also can go in by category and just see what the top publications according to Google Scholar are in those categories. I always say about Google Scholar, it's kind of comes with a health warning. Loads of data, but some of it isn't that great. So just to bear that in mind. And they're a lot more generous in what they include than Web of Science or Scopus. So the quality controls wouldn't always be as rigorous. So just to be careful around that. But again, another useful place just to see what they feel are the top journals in a certain field. Okay, so that is Google Scholar. And the Harzing one I mentioned, they do a journal quality list as well. So I say Harzing, it's a piece of software by a person called Harzing, who's a social scientist, and you can use that publisher perish software just to run analysis on individuals and journals. But they also have this journal quality list, which covers a number of areas, including economics, finance, accounting, management, and marketing. That's worth looking at. Now, I'm just going to quickly look at some of the tools. You might have noticed these tools are built into various databases, and they're just going to help you decide on journals. So, for example, in EndNote, if you use it, they have a tool called Match, and the idea there is to find a best fit journal for your manuscript. So you put in your abstract, your title, and they'll suggest journals, searching the Web of Science database, okay, and other resources they might have. You might want to be cautious about how much data you give them, but certainly give them enough just to give you a sense of what journals might be suitable. Elsevier have one called Journal Finder that you can use to find the perfect journal for your article. Again, they're going to be searching within their own categories. Some people use JSTOR. Again, just do a normal search, but it'll give you a sense of journals in your field. PubMed Reminer, similar idea. You're searching in there, you're getting a sense of publications in your field. Springer Journal Suggester is another one if you're inclined to publish with Springer. Wiley have one. Jane is another one, Journal Author Name Estimator. So this search uses the Medline dataset as well and just again suggests journal titles. The European Reference Index for Humanities and Social Sciences could be a good place to look. Again, it'll give you a sense of journals that are out there and will include non-English language ones, which is important because if you consider that, Web of Science and Scopus, they're more concerned with, kind of English-centric world, whereas obviously there are a lot more languages out there, and you might well be interested in publishing in different languages, so you might want to look in there as well. Okay. And then there's CORE, this computer research and education. And again, you're going to be familiar with these, in your own subject areas. I'm sure there are go-to places that you might want to look in. There's Journal Guide. Now, and as I kind of mentioned as part of this, tracking key authors and citations. So this is something you can do. So you can search for things like prestigious authors, co-authors in your field, certain academic institutions, if you know they're kind of trending well in that area. Where are they publishing? What subjects are they publishing in? And then rank the journals that they're actually publishing in. And this is just the example I showed you already, just the Oxford Brookes one. You go and have a look at that, like that. And I have more of this in library resources. So in the guides and tutorials section, I have a guide to academic journal publishing, and you'll find a lot of what I have covered. And also there's a guide in there to research impact that you could take a look at. That will give you kind of ideas on how to improve the impact of your work. Okay, so that's that bit. I just want to mention open access briefly as well. I did mention it at the start, and there is a big push now from funders and other places to publish your work open access. And there's loads of benefit to this. You're going to increase the exposure of your work, the readership, citations, the impact generally of your work, but also you're going to get a good wide readership, academics, non-academics, it's worldwide. So it's kind of a democratization of your work as well, which is quite nice. So you might well end up with collaborations and connections that you hadn't kind of hadn't been possible before, I suppose. So it is very useful. A lot of the research is publicly funded, so the feeling is it should be out there rather than having to pay to get your work through firewalls. Okay, some more benefits, broadening access, citations, profile of Irish researchers, profile of Maynooth, all that good stuff. There's lots of different benefits to it. And they're just listed, the more increased readership, visibility, citations. You can keep copyright if you're publishing open access. You have options there to maybe through Creative Commons to keep the copyright to your papers, which is good, democratization. And you can also possibly publish your own journal titles. Some people do that. So that is an option for you as well. And guides wise, we've lots in this in Maynooth. So there's the open access publishing agreements guide. So if you're you want to take advantage of an open access publishing agreement, you can go in there, click into the journal titles, and just see if your journal is covered. There'll be full listings in there of what's covered. There also details if there's any issues around um, making use of that. Sometimes they run out towards the end of the year, so you might want to check that before you approach them. But generally, publishing early in the new year is a good time to publish. You know, they're going to be well funded, and there's a better chance of the article processing charge getting waived. Um, to find open access journals, there's also a directory of open access journals. You might want to take a look at that, just to get a sense of what's out there, within your subject areas, when you're deciding where to publish. And you can also check Sherpa Romeo that I mentioned earlier as well. And that'll not only give you details on copyright policies and archiving, but also good lists of journals that you could look at, and publishers as well. And another one, the directory of open access repositories. If you're looking for places, obviously you want to be putting your papers into the Maynooth one because it's a well-maintained, and there's a commitment to that repository to protect your work on an ongoing basis. But it might also be important at a subject level for you to deposit your work in other subject repositories. So worth your while looking at that. And this is just another guide we have done on open access publishing platforms community. So there's a number of journals that are published in Maynooth open access, and they're listed in there. And there'll be details in there of how to go about that. Whether it's, software you might want to use. And Fiona there is head of digital programs. She'd be happy to take queries on that, and the whole team in there that can help you with that. So, do feel free to if you feel that maybe, your subject area isn't currently covered by the publications that are there, and you might feel it'd be beneficial to actually, create your own journal. You could do that. So I think that is it. Thank you very much. I will stop sharing, and we've a bit of time for questions. I'm happy to take them.